Hi everyone, I hope everyone's doing well. I'm going to be discussing critical race narrative for Module 3 and my racial identity development. As a person of color, specifically female Hispanic American, who's grown up in LA, Los Angeles, and California, primarily around other Hispanics, surrounded by a lot of us, I would say that I was grateful for that. I was able to relate to a lot of people growing up within similar cultures. But I would also say that in a way it was kind of to my detriment because I wasn't always exposed to different cultures and races, ethnicities around me. And I think it kind of kept me very sheltered and thinking that most people were raised the same way I was. Later on, I would, of course, realize that that was not the case. But I think that in that way, I kind of was raised more so being very comfortable with my Hispanic heritage. But later on, as I grew up and went to school, I realized that, everyone was trying to be kind of the same, embracing that like white culture. And I would say that I began to conform more to that. And at a certain point, I even stopped speaking Spanish, which was my first language, in order to also continue. I would say that a lot of what helped shape my identity was my traditions growing up with holidays, the food that we would make together with my family, and also kind of like after high school, or not after high school, but like when I started working in high school, making money, helping support my family or like my mom specifically. Um, I I would do that, and I thought that was something that was a normal thing for most kids to do or most cultures. But later I realized that it was very specific more so to Spanish or Hispanic culture. As far as what framed my racial identity, um, and kind of like started bringing the idea of my race more to the forefront and different races, was when I was in high school and I had more friends of different ethnicities, and we would have conversations. And I do recall one incident with my one of my friends. We were cooking at her home, and we were looking for a certain utensil, and I didn't know what she was looking for. She finally pulled it out, and she was like, "This is what it was." And I responded with, "Oh, you mean a bean masher? That's what you were looking for, a bean masher." She basically like laughed, hysterically, and thought it was so funny that that's what I referred to it as. Um, because my culture being Mexican, like that's what we would use it primarily for, so that's how I referred to it as. She thought it was really funny, and thinking back to it, it was kind of mean spirited of her to laugh at me for that. But I think in that moment I did realize, and just like kind of going forward, that not everybody identified the same as me, and as far as upbringing with their culture. I was aware of that around me, but I think that it just started to become um, more brought to the forefront of my mind at that point that we were different, and I had different experiences than other people, growing up. Um, Thinking back to that time in high school, I think that I experienced a lot of dissonance, um, and I was still trying to be more of that white, like in that white, like narrative, because that was what was highly regarded in society. Still not speaking Spanish very much, but at the same time, because of experiences like that, I was more aware of racism, and just in our society affecting, others around me, and at times even myself. Um, as far as another experience where like I experienced in this time sexism. In regards to my race was when I was paid a different wage than my boyfriend at the time for working the same job and the same event during the same pay period, where that's all we both worked. He made more than I at the time on that check, and I didn't. I was just floored as to why, and I realized it's because I am a female and a Latin female at that. And I realized then that we are still viewed as lower in society, and sexism is still alive, especially in the workforce. My friend, he was a white, like, identified more of as a white male, especially in his physical appearance. So I was kind of, brought to white supremacy being alive as well. And that just, at that point, I began to really see sexism in the workforce, and just made me a lot more cognizant of how much I make, and to just be more aware of these things in our society that could affect me and that have affected me. Additionally, at this point in my development, I was my early 20s. So in Erikson's psychosocial stages of development, I would be in identity versus role confusion, which basically I was forming clear sense of who I was socially, morally, and professionally. And I experienced sexism, which did have a powerful impact on me entering into adulthood and into the workforce at the time. It showed me that systemically, society still does treat people unfairly based on gender and race, and we were all directly affected by it. I'm no exception, especially being a Hispanic female. And I believe that it's now given me a stronger awareness of social injustice and really reinforced one of my core values, which is fairness and equality. And what has really led me to social work, one of the things that's led me to this field. As far as how I would navigate this situation differently, I would probably, if I could do it again, take more action and, you know, reach out to my workplace and ask what was the difference as far as pay, challenge it more. I was so young at the time that I didn't challenge it. So in that way, my lack of action just kind of further perpetuates sexism in the workforce. And knowing what I know now, even if I couldn't get total equality from my action, it's better to speak than not to, because at least you're driving the conversation forward.